Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this special live broadcast all the way from Ballinascarthy in West Cork. My name is Aidan Brennan. I'm the dairy editor with the Irish Farmers Journal, and we're here today to, I suppose, acknowledge and honour, and more importantly, to learn from the 2020 Grassland Farmer of the Year winner, Caroline Walsh. Before we go to Caroline and her advisor, Mark Tracy, just a little bit about the competition itself. So it's part of the Teagasc Grass 10 programme, with industry sponsors, Grassland Agro, AIB Bank, Department of Agriculture, FPD Insurance, and ourselves in the Farmers Journal. Caroline won the competition last year for, I suppose, outstanding performance in each of the areas that the judges were looking at. And I've no doubt in my mind, but if we're in more normal times, there'd probably be a couple of thousand people going through the farm today for the open day. But we are where we are, and we need to make the most of what we have. So tonight's broadcast is going to be a combination of videos, questions and answers, and general discussion between Caroline and Mark and myself. So tune in for the next hour or so. You can get your questions in through Zoom, type them in, and we'll answer them throughout the evening. Before maybe we go to Caroline, just a quick intro video to bring us up to date on where Caroline is and the farm is.
I farm here in Ballinascarthy with my husband Joe, and we have 5 children. There is 50 acres on the grazing platform. We carry generally 70 cows, so that's a stock rate of 3.7 livestock units to the hectare. So the farm is divided into 20 paddocks. A lot of money has been spent on infrastructure to make these paddocks more accessible to, I suppose, the back end of the paddock for the start and the end of the year to avoid poaching and just make it easier to get cows out early in the spring. Last year the cows supplied over 500 kilos of milk solids to Lisavaird. This year I'd be hoping for 530. Before I came here, cows had been milked here. Cows needed to cross the road, so one of the main things for when we started the cows back up here was a tunnel needed to go in to cross the road, because there is over 60% of the grazing platform is below the road and the remaining is above the road.
Right, Caroline, that's a nice snapshot of the farm. Maybe just bring us up to date on where things are at the moment in terms of grass growth and what the cows are eating.
So I suppose the video was made last week. Temperatures were a lot colder. Things have heated up this week. The big difference is sheltered part of the farm has grown double the amount of the coldest part, or the lower end of the farm. We carried extra cover as a safety net. We need to get that under control now because growth is starting to take off. We were feeding 1.5 kilos of silage and 5.5 kilos of ration. The silage is gone, the ration has been dropped to 4 kilos, intakes are up, grass is growing, and control measures need to be put in place.
You're a happy lady, so things are fine.
Yeah, very happy. The sunshine today, West Cork, couldn't be in a better place.
Definitely. Right, we'll look, as I say, if there's questions, we'll take them throughout the day. I mean, we're going to go straight into our first video now, and we'll have more discussion after this, and this is on grassland management, which is obviously the reason why we're here today is because Caroline is brilliant at grassland management, so we're going to see what she does here.
Generally for the year, I walk the farm once a week. I suppose in the springtime, I do one walk in January, then I start walking more regularly from the middle of February on, once the sun starts shining and the ground starts drying out. In the middle of the summer, I could go walking the farm every 5 days, depending on where the growth rate is at. If things get tight, I walk more regularly. If growth explodes, I walk more regularly, because then I can make the choices of taking out paddocks if it's going ahead of me, or to introduce silage or more meal if it's not growing to where I need it to be. So when I put my figures into pasture base and I update the wedge, I go back and I recalculate, I see what amount of ration I have in, my allocation of grass to make sure it's correct. If I can see from it that the average farm cover is dropping below a level that it needs to be. I can increase the ration, or I can put in silage, which I've had to have done before. When we took out a lot of ground last year, we took out 10 acres for reseeding, and we did pinch ourselves in the middle of May. We went in with silage for 10 days. It didn't upset the cows. Everything was able to stay going. If I hadn't been grass measuring, I probably wouldn't have gone in with silage early enough. I'd have probably driven the average farm cover down into the ground, and I would have gone into a bit of a tailspin. So to me, I can calculate, if I do my grass walk on a Monday, I'll know where the cows are going. Up to Friday, Saturday, I can go put up wires if things are tight. If things aren't tight, then they'll be going into paddock and getting 3 grazings out of it. But I can make a plan, put it in place. If Caitlin's bringing in the cows, if Joe's bringing in the cows, everybody knows where everything is going and how many feeds are in each paddock. The ideal cover that I like to go into is covers of 1400. I find that the cows perform best. Cleanouts are very good at it. If I find that there's covers of 16 and 1700 coming in front of me, I take a look at the wedge and see if I can take that paddock out and keep cows in the cover of the 1400. The other thing that I find is we have a good few paddocks with Abergain, and I find that if I go into covers that are 17, 1800, that the cows don't find the grass as palatable. So 1400 is the nice round figure. At the start of 2020 or any other given year, I don't set out to say I have to get 10 grazings done per paddock. It's great to be able to get 10 grazings per paddock, but it's probably because we're constantly going into 1400 covers that the 16s and the 17s are being taken out. There's bales being made out of them. The rotation stays fine and nifty, but it's not a parameter that I say that everybody has to meet.
Caroline, one of the first things we've seen in the video is that you're not on your own here. You've plenty of help around.
Yeah.
Just explain who's help.
I suppose we were never given massive credit growing up, and I wouldn't do it either. But the lads are watching. It's what dreams are made of. I mean, like when I'm milking the cows and I see the passion that the lads have, there's a lot of pride in it, and it's great. And there can be conflict, constructive criticism and everything, but it's super. Caitlin's 15, Caitlin go for the cows, Daniel will milk the cows, Leanne, Connor, Louise, they'll feed the calves. It's brilliant. Joe and all the lads, like everybody just rows in. There's a lot of work has to go on. There's a lot of organisation. There's a handy bit of stress, but when everybody works together, it's a super job.
Yeah, it's all the wheels working together. Yeah. I think is the key thing on this farm. Look, performance is top class. I mean, you're on average over the last 2 years, you've grown 15 tons of grass. You've got 10 grazings per year. Just explain the detail of how you actually achieve that and how you've come to this point.
I suppose as one of 6, we all grew up with this thing. We wanted to prove everybody else wrong and always do the best that you could do. And I suppose 70 cows isn't a figure that you hear an awful lot these days. You hear the hundreds and everything. And like you want to show that you can do it, like it can be done. Our grazing platform wouldn't be seen as massive, but by Jesus, if you can get it working right, you can make it work for you. And you can, I suppose, achieve the profits that you want to get from what you're doing if you can have the attention to detail.
What is that attention to detail? Now, come into a bit more detail.
Grass measuring and having the dream cow. It took me a long time. I mean, like, I hate imperfect udders. So cows were concentrated on, and when I came out here, in fairness, Patrick and Joe, they gave me free rein. And free rein meant that I could do what I wanted to do. I had a great advisor in Mark. I soil sample every year, and the big thing was we couldn't go up in numbers. West Cork,
so
I suppose.
You have a 20-hectare block here.
Yeah.
Effectively, that's what you have on the platform. You have other land away now, in fairness, but this is what you had.
And we're not the kind of people to be looking over the ditch and saying, "Oh, I might shove him out of the way." Like everybody works together here. Yeah. And it's great to have gotten to here, but it took a lot of work.
So you measured the grass, 45 times last year? What's your plan for the next few weeks now? How often are you going to be measuring it?
Once the homeschooling doesn't come back, I'll be measuring it a lot more. I suppose I was going every Monday there with the last 5 or 6 weeks, but the way the grass has exploded this week, I'll be going Friday. If I leave it for a week, it could be too long at this stage.
But go back now to achieving that, the tonnages. Okay, you mentioned soil fertility and obviously you're seeding, and we'll cover that later. But the 10 grazes per year, a lot of farmers really struggle to achieve that. How are you doing it?
I suppose getting into covers of 1400 means that anything that goes to 16 or 17 is baled. Cows are always going into the right cover. If you're skipping the ones you're not, the rotation isn't going out too long in front of you. Getting out early in the spring, compact calving, infrastructure is absolutely massive. Like, the more gaps you can have going into a field, the earlier you can get out. You can do the 3-hour blocks. You don't have cows going in and out the same gap 6 times. You've less poaching, so you're more likely to go out on the overcast day in the spring. It's good for man and good for beast.
Yeah, okay. So you're doing...
Sorry, woman.
What I'm hearing is you're doing the basics brilliantly. Like, the farm is well set up, and you're able to utilise, when you can graze, you're able to go, you are going out there, Maybe bring us up to date a little bit. I know you mentioned it at the start, and we might bring up the wedge if it's available, just to look at current performance. This is the wedges up now. So obviously, look, growth rate, 37 kilos a day. You mentioned at the start, half the farmers growing more than the other one. Just go through that for me.
Yeah, I suppose the above the road, as we call it, was growing in the 50s last week, and below the road was growing in the 20s. And I suppose below the road was more exposed, but going down today, it's after turning around. So I can see that below the road is now growing 50. And I'm like, right, will I take bales? What'll I do? And
well, you have a lovely wedge at the moment, like, you'd have to say.
But it's going to go away from me because growth has exploded. And if I don't act, I will end up going into 17 and 1800s, which I don't want to do, because the cows have to work harder, the graze outs aren't good enough, and I would find it very difficult to get back into 14s if I go into too many high covers.
So what's the plan? What are you going to do?
I'll walk on Friday and I'll let you know then.
What could you do, let's say?
I suppose I can sit in the fence on 5 acres maybe. I have 5 acres coming out for reseeding anyway, and if I need to leave for the 5 acres there to wait and see, I will pick the variety of grass that is more palatable at a higher cover.
Okay. And in terms of reseeding then, did you mention you're going to spray off a few fields?
I have 2 paddocks that I suppose pasture base is telling me that are underperforming with the last 2 years. The highest paddocks are growing 17 tonne, and the 2 paddocks that I've earmarked are growing 11.5 tonne. So there's a deficiency there of 5.5 tonne, which will have to be made up for in ration if I don't do something about it.
Okay. You mentioned, and we got a question in as well, you mentioned about the fertilizer. You're currently spreading CAN. Have you used protected urea, and what's your opinion on it?
So I have used protected urea. I wasn't too sure a year and a half ago. Last year I was still like, I don't know. This year I suppose I watched it more, and I think it is performing the same. But when the cold weather came, I don't know, somebody whispered in my ear, or I read it somewhere, or something happened anyway, and I decided that CAN would possibly perform better in cold weather, and we're going out now at the moment with CAN and sulphur.
Okay, yeah. Maybe just Mark, on that, on the cold weather and protected urea, is there an issue with there, or where?
So I don't think there's much of an issue there really. The science would say that it will work. I suppose possibly urea is slightly slower acting in the soil, so there might be a small benefit, but I would think the margin is small on it.
Yeah, yeah. And will you go back using it again when the weather heats up and ground heats up?
Yeah, I suppose fertiliser prices were rising, so I bought enough CAN with the sulphur to try and get out the sulphur at this time of the year. So once that's used up, I'd imagine the end of May, start of June, we'll be back in the protected urea.
One more question on the grazing. Question came in here. Did you graze much of the farm in March? Can you remember what percentage you got?
So we started grazing on the 28th of February, and I think we might have missed 1.5 days since then.
Okay, so you've went hammer and tongs when
Hammer
you
and
could,
tongs,
but you're late now. In fairness, you're normally earlier.
Yeah, but I don't know, the weather, there was no settled spell of weather coming, and I didn't want to upset the cows.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So rather than trying to tackle it, I suppose we do a big thing here now. At the back end of the year, we decide what cover we're going to carry into the winter, so it lets it easier for us to manage in the spring.
I suppose it's important to say as well, you do calve early here. When's the first cow calving?
12th of January this year.
And the reason for that, Caroline?
I have no husband or any manpower in the yard come the start of March or whenever the weather goes right. So I suppose to try and make things easy for the lads, that I'm not roaring saying, hi, come here to the cow calving, come on, I need help or something. It's a lot easier to just try and get it all out of the way early.
So the issue is that there's two businesses in this yard. Joe and his family are agricultural contractors, and you can't see, but we're surrounded by machinery here in this shed. So the reason is that they get busy in March and April, so you want
But it doesn't make any sense. Everybody has a burst of a month in them, like, and geez, if you can get the most of the calving done in a month, it's absolutely super when you come to Valentine's Day and Joe cooks the big romantic meal. Not his mother cooks it. But anyway, yeah, so it's great that you can kind of sit down and relax and say, right, I have a big month done and there's only 15 cows left to calve.
Yeah. But in an ordinarily on a more normal situation, you probably wouldn't be calving until the 1st of February. It's just the labour's
No, we have
available.
never gone to the 1st of February. Yeah. I don't think I'd ever want to go to the 1st of February. I want to have my cow hitting the ground running when she's going to grass. I think like you have to respect the cow. I suppose farming is male dominated, and anybody would know that if you were after having a child, the last thing you want to be doing is standing out in the cold next to a ditch. You know? Sorry.
Yeah. Can't experience that myself now, so we'll take your word for it.
Okay.
Maybe just to move on in terms of reseeding, which obviously has played a large part of the role in this farm, because while you're growing 15 tonnes, I think we'll play the video and we'll have a chat then.
So we're standing here in paddock 3, and from the use on pasture base, I suppose I can see that this isn't performing the way it should be. The highest growing paddocks are growing 17 tonne, and this paddock last year grew 11.5 tonne. It wouldn't have been too bad from where we were 5 years ago when we were growing an average 9 tonne, but for the averages that we're getting now, 11.5 is too far behind. So we grazed this paddock on the 24th of February. We still haven't grazed it the middle of April. Growth rate is slow. That to me tells me it needs to be reseeded. Our plan here is to spray off, disc, set, roll. I suppose we'll use 2 bags of 18-6-12 and grand lime if it's needed, because every year we soil sample and we give lime to the paddocks as they need them. So it's only kind of a maintenance for the reseeding. We have chosen to use a grass seed mix of Aston Energy, Aber-Choice and Aber-Gain with a kilo of clover. Aber-Gain in this farm is great to grow grass. We like to get into that max 1,500 kilos to get the best graze outs in it. We'll hope to graze it then at 1,100, and I suppose depending on growth we'll try and get into it every 12 to 14 days after that, not going beyond the 1,200 of a cover to try and get the sward as dense as possible before the autumn. These paddocks were reseeded last year with Aston Energy and Aber-Choice. The sward is very dense. I'm delighted with it. The cows will come in here tomorrow morning and happy days.
Caroline, the reasons for those varieties, why did you pick them?
So Aber-Gain is grows super grassier. The paddocks that we've used it in have been growing 17 tonne. And once we learned how to manage it right, it's phenomenal. I love it. The only thing is I find that the sward is a bit open. Last year we reseeded 10 acres of reclaimed ground with Aston Energy and Aber-Choice, and it's a picture. I mean, I could sell grass seed for you if you went down there now today. The sward is lovely and dense. The palatability is phenomenal. The graze outs are super for, you know, ground that I suppose we weren't getting as much production out of before. Yeah. So it's worked.
You've combined all three so for this year's reseeding?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you say Aber-Gain needs to manage right. What are you doing there to manage it?
I forgot we have a kilo of clover going into the mix as well. Aber-Gain to manage it. I suppose when we started first, I remember I had an argument with John McNamara, and I was like, there's something wrong with Aber-Gain, there's something wrong with Aber-Gain. And the cows go out into the field and they turn around and walk back into the parlour and be bawling, and I was like, what in the name of God? But it was actually the fact that we were going into covers of 1,800, which we shouldn't have been. And I reckon that the palatability of the sward wasn't there. So once we started going into max 1,1500s, it's super job.
And does that look different? You know, does the 1400 for Abergain look different to 1400 for some other variety?
I suppose the sward is more open. I mean, like you go into Aston Energy and Aberchoice and it's like, it's more of a carpet. And I suppose the one thing with the Abergain, if they do get poached, they dry out faster because it's more open. But the ground that we have the Aston Energy and Aberchoice in, we're not going to poach because we're picking our times to go down there because it was reclaimed ground.
Yeah. In terms, you mentioned clover, and you have a good bit of clover in already. You're happy to grow it?
I am. Science is telling us it's the way to go. It hasn't given me a reason not to use it. I found that we reseeded 10 acres there going back 2 years ago. What we reseeded in May grew more clover than the one that we reseeded in August, so the clover took off. And I found the sward was probably more open because the clover got ahead of the grass. It was probably dry that time of the year and the clover was stronger. But I'm hoping to overseed that this year just to try it out to see if it will make a difference, because other than that, the paddocks are growing the grass, but just that poaching might be a problem if it's that open with the clover.
Potentially, yeah, but you're probably 12 months away, or 10 months away anyway from that being an issue, from poaching being a major issue, I suppose, in next spring anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Just on obviously there's two sides to growing more grasses, the reseeding, and then there's the soil fertility. I might bring you in, Mark, just on the soil fertility. What's the status of the farm?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, it's something Caroline has spent an awful lot of time working on. I suppose the first thing she did when she went about trying to grow more grass is she started soil sampling every year. Initially, there was quite a bit of work to be done bringing up the P's and K's on the farm, and also a good bit of lime to be spread. At this stage, she's very much keeping the farm topped up. Of the actual milking platform, nearly half the farm is at the correct target pH, P and K level, which is very, very good.
That's all three. I mean,
all three together.
90% of farms are deficient in one or all of them. Yeah.
In terms of K, all the milking platform is now at either index 3 or 4. There was a bit of an issue there in last year's soil samples. That was rectified by going out with protected urea with K also in the bag. So it's good to see that fixed. This year's slight issue was a few of the paddocks need a bit of lime. Caroline has that corrected already. And I suppose the other area that did show up in this year's soil samples is some of the silage ground is very low in K. So that will need targeting. Perhaps maybe testing the slurry to see how much nutrients are actually in it, and how much is getting sent back. There might be something to look at going forward.
The stocking rate here is quite high. You're 3.7, I think, is it?
Yeah.
So how much silage is made on the platform here? Or is it
None.
all? None of it, yeah. So it's all coming in from
The
outside.
bales wouldn't be massive. Like last year when we reclaimed that ground, we ran at a stocking rate of, was it 4.3 or something? And it was like, walking the tightrope.
Yeah. Mark, just one more question. I know we've come out of it, well, we're still in a dry spell, but the last couple of weeks have been particularly dry. Is sulphur more of an issue now, or what's your advice to farmers regarding sulphur?
So I suppose, look, the area that I'm working in, kind of dryish farms near the coast, typically they will see a response to sulphur. As you say, dry weather is typically when we see the issues with it, and we're just coming into the period now that it needs to be got out on farm. I suppose a lot of the latest research is showing that even the farms away from your typical ones that you would have always said needed it, there is a benefit, and probably getting on 15 to 20 units of your sulphur is the way to go.
There's less of it in the atmosphere or something. What's your plan, sulphur-wise?
Well, we're going out with it now at the moment. The can has 3.5% or 3.5 units of sulphur, so each round it's getting that. So
yeah, okay. Right, folks, keep your questions coming in. We're getting a good few in already, and we'll get some throughout the next while. The next topic we're going to go on to, the next video we're going to play is one that Caroline is very passionate about. You might have got a picture of that already. It's about breeding, and we'll discuss it there. So we think we'll play this video.
the average of the herd EBI here is just over 180. The heifer calves, which will be retained for 2 years' time, are averaging over 250. I suppose we're started the breeding season on the 12th of April. All cows were tail painted 3 weeks before that with red tail paint. Everything that showed up in heat got green tail paint, and as their AI, they'll get aquamarine tail paint. On the 12th of April, when we started AIing, there was 12 cows left with red tail paint. Since then, there has been ones come in bulling that probably didn't need to be scanned, but we thought it was better to be safe than sorry. There was 2 coiled. So on this farm, we don't run a stock bull, I suppose, with 5 children and health and safety. I don't like bulls, simple as that. We use all AI. A couple of years ago, we put in a Smacks Tech bolus system into the cows. So I get alerts from that for animals going in heat or sickness or anything like that. So I suppose in the first 3 weeks, we generally AI once a day. If there's a good number of cows going in the morning, we will AI them that evening, but as a general rule of thumb, it is once a day. Cows, after they stop standing heat, get the tail paint straight away. So every day, any cow that is without tail paint on any given day needs to be served. Other than that, they're not left 2 or 3 days to be without tail paint, because I find if there's someone else milking, or if you send the lads down to collect the cows, everybody knows that if there's no tail paint, there's something going on. On this farm, we're 100% AI. The cows last year done 515 kilos of milk solids. The target is 550 from a predominantly grass-based diet. We feed maize in the spring, I suppose, to try and keep the energy levels up and to get the best out of the cow at that time of the year. The only way forward, I suppose, is to try and bring up the fat and protein another bit. The litres I'm very happy with. Generally, I try not to go above plus 100 kilos in milk, because we have enough milk. I use high milk sex semen on some of the Jersey crosses to bring a bit of milk back into them. We have 15 heifer calves that go to my father's place for rearing, and they're AI'd by James over there. When I go to pick bulls, I pick all pedigree. I find that you're going to definitely have good udders, good strong feet, legs. You can see the production of the dams before it. I suppose my decision is heavily weighted on composition. Definitely plus 0.1 in protein and 0.15, 0.2 in fat. Our 6-week calving rate last year was 88, this year it was 91. That wouldn't mean to say that we're absolutely excellent and have serious fertility. It means that we sell off the late calvers. We try and get everything out of here with a value. So if we held on to everything, we would still have the April calvers. But we try and keep things as compact as possible. And another big thing when I'm picking bulls is milking speed and temperament, because I find we have 2 slow milkers. They get an Angus straw every year. I sell heifer calves. I don't want to sell slow milkers. So if I put Angus to them, that's fine. They slow down the parlour at the moment, but I'm not going to cull them for it. But I definitely don't want to breed for a cow that has slower milking speed. So being a low-sized herd, our pot is smaller to pick our heifers from. The slow milkers generally get a beef straw. Anything that's low protein gets a beef straw. And from that then, anything that's born is, I suppose, has good genetic merit to either for us to keep or for us to sell. We can stand over them. I don't want to be selling stock that have problems. And I don't believe that you should get a name for selling stock that have problems. So the team of bulls that we're using for this year are on average EBI of 300. This cow has an EBI of just over 200, and her son last year entered AI with the Origin AI services, Crowhan Dairy Sunny, FR 6969. He has an EBI today of 289.
So I think it's fair to say that not only is Caroline excellent at grass, but she's also really good at breeding, and you really need the two together in order to fully utilise what grass she's grown and converting that then to milk solids in an efficient manner. So I think with her DBI of 180, it's top class performance. Caroline, I have plenty of questions, and we've plenty coming in as well from Zoom, so keep them coming. A couple here just on the breeding, what we've just seen. Is just selecting pedigree bulls going to limit your choice of what bulls you can use?
There's a saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And I find that there's an awful lot more consistency to a pedigree breed. If you can look at a catalogue and you can see a classification of the first dam, the second dam and the third dam, if you breed something that is proven to what you have in front of you, you're going to get something that is as good as what you have. So that's what you want.
Now, you have some Jersey crossbred cows in the herd, so, you know, were you open in the past or something, or what has changed in the meantime?
I suppose myself and Dad were always open to trying anything new. We used 36 semen straws going back 10 years ago. I suppose 10% of the herd is crossbred. I'll keep 10%. I like to, I suppose, see the performance difference between the two. This year I've bought 10 sex semen straws to use on those cows.
They're Jersey as well, or no?
No, they're Frisian.
Frisian, all right.
Yeah. I like their level of production, but my problem is the cull cow value and the calf. Where do you go with the calf?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Just on them, on production, and it's interesting in the video, you're not looking for high volume. Maybe just explain to me what your herd PTA is for milk volume currently, and maybe how many litres you're producing annually. Just sticking with litres, which I know isn't really the right thing, but just discuss that for a moment.
So I think our predicted PTA is 60. I'm not sure. I think our litres are around 6.4, 6.5. And I suppose the big main thing is to get to try and get as near as possible to the 550 kilos of milk solids.
Yeah. So you did 515 or something last year?
515 last year. We don't keep late calvers. Like that is one thing. Like I reckon that figure 515 could be at 540 if I kept the late calvers or the ones that aren't in calf. I mean, like they're going to be the ones that are going to milk from the middle of August on. All our ones that are late calvers or the ones going to calve in April next year are gone. So
Okay.
515 I'm very happy with for what I actually have in the yard.
So you're saying you're actually reducing your stocking rate in the autumn?
Yeah.
And so that 515 is across the average of all the cows in the herd. So if you kept them going, you'd have a lot more.
I would be higher, but it makes more sense for me, management-wise, in August to sell them to have more grass for the cows that are left to try and get the fat and protein at that time of the year.
Yeah, I don't think you've mentioned it already. How much meal are you feeding annually?
Last year was 850. I actually written at the top of my diary, I don't know, everybody will probably shoot me for doing this, but to put figures on it, in 2017, we spent 32,000 on ration. Last year, we spent 21,000. We done the very same kilos of milk solids across the farm.
In total,
So there's 12,000 of a difference.
And had you more or less cows now versus back then?
Oh, average, same.
Same.
Yeah. But the big difference was we were growing 9.5 ton of grass, and now we're growing on average 15 ton.
Where are you going to be ration-wise? Are you happy with that figure, or do you want to go down to 500 or increase it? Or what's
No, I'm definitely not going to 500. My cows, I like my cows. I don't want any falling off. I don't know, people can tell me that they only need to, or that so many litres will be done out of grass only. But I like my cows, and they will get ration. 850 will probably be as low as I'll go.
So you're just selecting pedigree, you are using genomics,
Yeah.
you're happy, and your herd is, most of your cows are genotyped at this stage, are they?
They are, yeah, they're all genotyped. I do use a Gene Ireland pack every year of 35 straws. I suppose you have to dabble. It's like the lotto, like, you know, you have to try and just strive to get that bit better. Like, and if you genotype the heifer calves, sure, you're going to, it's like a second opinion. I know the mothers, the proofs are there for the fathers. The genotype is a second opinion. It's a backing to tell me this cow is good, but this heifer is definitely going to be good. Or if it's going to tell me otherwise, or the big thing I find, milking speed. Like milking speed to me is like, it's a pet hate if the cow is going to be slower. If it's going to predict that the cow is going to be slower, then she's definitely moving on, like, you know?
Yeah, we might come to that at the end. You're very time efficient and you won't want any slowdowns in this yard.
No.
Another question I have is, so obviously you're using tail paint, we see that in the cows, it looks good and all the rest, but you're also using an automated heat detection system. Why are you using both and will not just rely on one when you've invested in the expensive one?
Belt and braces. If I go out into the yard and the tail paint is gone and the bolus is telling me that the cow is bulling and I can see that the cow is bulling, that's 3 people telling me that cow is bulling, so that straw is definitely worthwhile putting into the cow. If the tail paint isn't gone and the bolus tells me the cow is bulling, I'm still going to put a straw into the cow. I'll put a note out for Ernest, say, go handy. I'm not sure if she's actually going or not. And, you know, maybe 2 times out of 7, if you get a false alert, like, if there's 2 of them are actually going And if the other 5 aren't, it definitely, those 2 straws have definitely been worthwhile, because I've picked up those 2 which I wouldn't have picked up.
Yeah.
without
Could have been a
the-
missed heat otherwise, and
Yeah.
€250 or whatever the
Yeah.
value of that is. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So you're not relying on just one. I think it's an important point to make that you want, no
Yeah.
one system. I think, as you said, is
And the other
100%.
thing is like, women love control, and I have the phone in the pocket and I can see what Smack's Tech is saying, but nobody else can. Whereas everybody else is in the picture with the tail paint, and it's kind of a bit of a rainbow job going on at the moment. But like Caitlin, it's great to encourage the children to be able to know things for themselves, rather than me being the dictator saying, look, this is the way it is. Whereas Caitlin can say to me, oh, sure, she hasn't been bulled yet. And I'm like, Jesus, how well you noticed that. So you have to reward that as well.
Because you're changing the different colours.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go back a step now for a moment. We have a few questions coming in Zoom, and keep them coming by all means. Because you did very little grazing in February, how was grass supply in April, and were you very tight in early April because that grass wasn't back in time?
So early April, I was looking at paddocks of 1,100 where I should be starting the second rotation. So what we actually done to try and settle the cow's stomachs as well was we actually started the second rotation on the 27th of March, and we mixed day and night. So by day they were getting the second rotation, and by night they were getting the first rotation, and they were also getting 4 kilos of maize to help draw it out to that when that week was over and when the real second rotation was there, like we were in a good enough position to be able to manage it, that the cows were eating what they needed to eat in an hour after milking, either morning or evening, if they needed to, like whichever suited, whatever was on, it fitted into that system.
2 questions on clover, and I might bring you into one of them, Mark. Would you consider stitching in clover or oversown clover?
Yeah.
Are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Second one then is, you're obviously sowing clover as well with your reseeds. How are you going to manage for weeds?
I think there's a document on a table somewhere that somebody's going to push through if we all pray for it. Other than that, cross my fingers and cross my toes that the weeds won't come and it won't need to be sprayed, and that the clover won't die.
Yeah, so it's a dodgy one. So unless that thing is what we're talking about is that the ability to license the sprayed, I suppose that's now taken off the market, and there's an ability to possibility that's going to happen, and we're hopeful that it is. We'll discuss clover again anyway in the next video, which I think we can come to now. So the next video is on sustainability. There's Caroline and Mark are speaking here at this one.
I'm Mark Tracy, Teagasc Dairy Advisor based in the Clonakilty office, and I've been working with Caroline for the last 6 years. Over the last number of years, I've seen Caroline's system evolve from a relatively high input system to a much more sustainable grass-based system. Caroline is also host farmer for our local Grass 10 grazing course. Sustainability is something we're hearing more and more about these days, and this farm gives a great example of some of the things that are being adopted in West Cork farms. The use of protected urea, better nutrient management, good breeding, increasing the EBI of the herds. Increasing herd EBI has been a focus of Caroline's and something that has been adopted widespread in West Cork. Increasing EBI improves our carbon footprint by breeding more efficient cows which will last longer in the herd, reducing overall environmental pressure. High EBI cows are more efficient and last longer in the herd, reducing their overall environmental pressure. Protected urea is now being adopted on a lot of West Cork farms. It's often spread in conjunction with potassium and sulphur. The key benefits of using protected urea is it's reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with using CAN, while also avoiding the potential ammonia emission losses from ordinary urea. Low-emission slurry spreading systems are now becoming much more common on farms. These systems are allowing more opportunities to get slurry onto the grazing platform, while also reducing potential ammonia emissions. To improve energy efficiency on farms, variable speed vacuum pumps are now becoming very common. We are also now starting to see PV panels appearing on many farm buildings. Water usage on the Carberry farms has been shown to be relatively low compared to international standards, with approximately 7 litres of water used per litre of milk produced. Carberry dairy farms have a relatively low carbon footprint, with approximately 1.1 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of corrected milk solids. Research has shown large benefits from incorporating white clover to our swards. These include improved cow performance, additional herbage grown, and a potential to reduce nitrogen applications. The ASSA programme has been in West Cork for the last number of years. My colleagues in Teagasc and Carberry have been working closely with dairy farmers in the area to try and improve water quality.
Sustainability is the new buzzword in farming. I suppose we all have to play our part. We're doing here to be sustainable in the future is trying to replace, maybe put a figure on it, a fifth of chemical nitrogen with slurry spread by low emission equipment to satisfy that box. With 5 children, things are always busy, so the number of cows, I could carry 80 cows and they might do the same as 64 cows. So I'd rather carry 64 cows and have 4 lines and no extras and have those 64 cows producing the 530 kilos of milk solids rather than the 80 cows doing the 400, 420. It just makes more economical sense to me. So in August, generally, we find that it makes more sense for us to sell the cows that are going calving later in the following spring because they can still achieve a good price and I can keep more grass into the cows that are left over in the herd. So if we ended up selling 6 or 7 cows that were going calving later because I have enough true compactness, then that's the time of the year they go out so that I can keep the grass in the diet for longer in the fall of the year. The one handy thing about pasture base is that on this farm, pasture base analyses the paddocks for me and tells me the ones that are underperforming, the ones that I should aspire to have more of. I sit down at the end of every year and do that with the cows. You have top performing cows that might produce 680 kilos of milk solids. You have low performing cows that might produce 380 kilos of milk solids. So to me, the important thing is to get rid of the lowest 10%. It mightn't necessarily happen in any one given year. I do not sell bad stock to pass it on to someone else. I don't like to do that. It might take it that the cow might be fertile enough to stay in the herd for the next couple of years, but either way, she's not going to be bred to dairy AI. She will get a beef straw. If I can bring up the average production of the herd, then I reckon that is going to be a more sustainable herd in the future. In my mind's eye, genotyping can help me do this. I don't necessarily go by the highest EBI figure. I think if I'd done that, I'm not sure what kind of a herd I'd actually end up with because there's an awful lot of components to EBI. One of the big things is milking speed, but the other thing is your components. Like if you can look at it and fine tune your heifer calf and pick out the best 15 that you have, then if they're going to be off of your best cows, then you can make a very sustainable herd in the future. This year we had 42 heifer calves, so 15 out of 42, top of the pops. Hopefully in 2 years' time, they will be better than our best cows now or somewhere near it. So on this farm, everything that is reseeded gets clover included in the mix. All the paperwork will tell us that it's going to reduce our nitrogen use, which is going to make us more efficient in the future. 2 years ago, in the peak grazing season, we tried out where we spread 2/3 of the rate of nitrogen on some of the clover paddocks, and we actually achieved the same level of growth as some of the rest of the farm. We will be using clover in the future. If science is anything to go by, we should all benefit from it. The one challenge that I would find with clover is that possibly the sward is a little bit more open and possibly more prone to poaching, but this year we're going to overseed one of those paddocks to see if it will make a difference, just to make it a little bit denser so that at the start of the year when we want to go grazing a paddock that has a lot of clover in it, that maybe there might be more density in the grassward.
So we're good to hear there about sustainability and see it in action. Look, there's a couple of different strands to this, and we're all getting more and more familiar with sustainability and what it means. You mentioned already about your meal bill being reduced. You spent 32,000 in meal in
2017.
And what was it last year?
21,000.
So on your, like, massive change there in terms of meal. How did you achieve that? What was the things that you...
Genetics and growing grass.
And Neil, I suppose why you were focusing on this is because, you're bringing in extra nitrogen in the meal. There's a carbon footprint associated to the meal as well, because a lot of that's coming from South America and places like that. So that's one way that you're going to become more sustainable is by reducing your concentrate levels, and you're happy to be saying at that. Nitrogen then is obviously a big one, and it's, there's a lot of focus on it. And, we are in the Carbery region, and there's a lot of farmers in derogation here, so it's important in that regard. Just go through how much nitrogen you plan to spread, or what you have spread historically maybe, and what your plan is for this coming season.
Historically is probably a Garrett's question. I think last year we spread 212. This year we're hoping to go to 200.
That's units per acre now of nitrogen. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
that's your terminology.
That's total nitrogen as well, Aidan. So
okay.
That's including
what do you mean by that now, Mark?
So that's including the slurry as well.
Right.
So like she's very, very on top of the game there.
So can you spit out the slurry just to make it universal figure? How many units of nitrogen is coming in the slurry roughly?
I suppose typically you're probably saving 20, 23 units on this farm in the spring by getting a lot of slurry on in springtime.
Yeah.
So 80% was spread in the first round with 2,500 gallons of slurry, and the ground that we couldn't get to was spread with 18,612. So that didn't happen any other year because I suppose that's the one thing when you bring in the pipes, you can get it out, and that was great this year to be able to do that.
So just to clarify now, my own head, I'm a bit slow on the slurry side of stuff. There's roughly about, if you could say, there's probably 10 or 12 units of nitrogen being provided by the slurry. Would that be fair?
Yes.
In total across the milking platform.
I would say I'd say it's probably higher on this farm.
Okay.
I'd say it's probably 20, 23 units is being.
So that means then there was 185 or 190 units of chemical nitrogen spread here last year.
I'd say ballpark around there.
Yeah. Okay. So that's historic.
Well, I'd say even when you get the soil fertility right, the response is better because what happened before was we needed to spread more nitrogen because the fertility wasn't right. So I think the ground probably responds better to the lower level of nitrogen because the pH and the soil fertility has been corrected.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. So this year then, obviously you mentioned the slurry, so you'd spread 80% of the farm got, what, 2,500 gallons of slurry or something?
First round, yeah.
And that didn't get any nitrogen then?
No, not until March.
Yeah, and that's different to ordinarily you would have went out with nitrogen,
yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't have put the slurry on it as much of the farm.
So 70 units went out by the 31st of March, and that was including the slurry, whereas before that would probably all have been chemical.
Okay, so you're making good inroads there.
Well, hopefully, because it didn't affect the grass growth, so it's a thing that I can do again next year because it worked this year, so I won't need to revert back to spreading more chemical at that time of the year.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's a simple thing to do, and it's a good time of the year to do it.
Yeah, and like the rest of the year, you see our opportunity isn't there to spread as much slurry because our rotation is short and snappy, so to get in and get out with the slurry, when you're going down to an 18-day rotation, you really don't want to be tainting the grass. And when all the lads are away, it's not like I can ring them up when they're in the middle of first cut and say, here lads, I have a couple of paddocks ready for spreading slurry,
Yeah, they have enough to be doing.
Yes.
So on those times that you're on the 18, 19-day round, which in fairness you will be now for the next couple of weeks, if, please God, growth rate takes off, are you going to be spreading the bag of can, or are you going to cut that back?
Down to unit a day, yeah.
Okay, so an 18-day round, you're going to be spreading 18 units?
Yeah.
Is that are you blanket spreading it, or are you going after each grazing, or once a week, or what's the system?
Depending where the lads are and what's happening, but the most of the time we try and get out, say we might do 2 or 3 paddocks together.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Now, obviously, one of the ways you're going to reduce chemical nitrogen is through the use of clover. We've mentioned it a good bit already today. You have clover in the farm, and you're planning to put more in. Where do you see is there a scope there? Do you see to get more clover in, or what's your feelings on it?
Whatever it was with the drought, the clover kind of spread mad here from the paddocks that it was established in. It kind of took off more in other paddocks. So our cover of clover is is the word adequate in this farm. I don't need to go in with it yet. I'll see when I reseed the paddocks, like if this whole spray malarkey isn't sorted out, then maybe the clover might die in that paddock and I might have to go in over sowing afterwards. But at the moment, the established paddocks, I don't need to.
In fairness, I walked most of the farm this morning, and there's good clover in your recently reseeded fields, and it looks at a good level for this time of year. So you'd say it is definitely going to contribute, probably later on.
But I'd say the grazing management probably has more to do with that. Like if you're going in at the lower covers, your grass is, you're going to promote the growth of clover more.
Yeah, fair point. Mark, for guys and girls that don't have much clover in, and are hearing all about clover, and we're always talking about it, and we're talking about reducing nitrogen really. What's your advice for them in order to get clover into their farms?
So I suppose first and foremost, they need to soil sample the farm and figure out what nutrient status is. Clover likes a pH of up around 6.3, and you also need your P index up in the 3s and 4s really for it to have a good chance of establishing. So I suppose get that stuff right first. If you're serious about getting clover onto the farm, I would suggest maybe a two-pronged approach. You might be reseeding 10% of the farm, put in your clover in with that. I suppose the key thing to watch there is clover is a very, very small seed, so make sure that seed doesn't get buried too deep, okay? But then to try and speed up getting the clover onto the farm, pick maybe 20% of the other paddocks that aren't going to be reseeded in the next couple of years and oversow them. So typically you'd be using about 2 kilos to the acre, or maybe 5 kilos per hectare of seed when you're oversowing.
And is there management practices you should be adopting for oversowing? What works best in this region?
So I suppose the big thing, I suppose, is it needs good contact with the soil. So I would stay away from paddocks that have a very, very dense grass sward. The paddocks that you are going to oversow, I would try and graze them out very, very well, or even take a cut of bales or something like that off them. Spread your seed. Like there's various implements out there, there's different types of harrows that can be used. Some people are just throwing fertilizer spreader with a small bit of 0730 or something like that. I suppose the key thing there is there's no nitrogen in whatever goes in with it. Spread it out. I've heard of people trampling it in with cattle for a day, maybe spreading watery slurry, that sort of stuff to get it in. And I suppose another key thing is if you want to go at this, you're kind of coming into the window of opportunity now, because if you do it in kind of late spring, you have a much better chance of establishment. There's still a bit of moisture in the soil to get the strike, but also you have a good bit of time to get a lot of grazings, because you need to graze that at maybe 1200 max for the next few grazings to get light into the developing clover plant.
Now, is it even too dry at the moment? Would you wait until there's more rain coming before you do it?
I'd be happy enough. I'd probably be nervous of the cold at the moment, but once we're sure the cold is gone, I'd work away.
And final question, Mark, on the clover, would you reduce the nitrogen after you establish it, or after you sow it?
I think that will give it a much better chance of getting going. If you were, I suppose, as much as anything, it's slowing down the grass plant, so the grass plant isn't competing quite as strong with the clover.
Yeah, very good. Caroline, I have a couple of quick fire questions for you. When you decide to go to paddock, so we discussed the wage earlier on, when you decide to go to paddock, and it could be next week or the week after, when you've hit that 16 or 1700, do you do it straight away, or do you let it bulk up to 2,500 before you get the buys in to nip it off?
Straight away.
Even at 1600s?
Yeah, I suppose I'm lucky that there's a fusion in the yard that the lads will go in and they won't charge me per acre or per bale or whatever, so I can do it at 1700, and then there are super bales to be feeding to the cows, and the paddock is back into the rotation where I need it to be. I can be back grazing that in 12 or 14 days' time if the growth is there.
Will you give it any special treatment after you cut it?
Try and go with slurry. And most of the time when the paddocks might be down here, if the weather, I suppose the mist might be starting to fall when the lads go mowing the paddocks here, so the weather is right for the slurry then, you know.
Could be left to last, is what you're saying.
Not always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another one on a question came in from Zoom. Multi-species, any interest in it? Have you any put in, or what's your feelings?
I'm not too sure. I suppose my only feeling on it was the chicory and the plantain. We went to a farm walk above in Shinnock there a couple of years ago, and I suppose, I think it's meant to be a natural diuretic. So a diuretic means that you go around and you urinate more often. And anybody will know that, I suppose, the anatomy of cows is probably similar to humans. And if you do that and you want to increase your lactation, it mightn't exactly be possible because you can lead to prolapses and stuff. So I don't think the men that were coming up with the mixed multi-species were actually thinking of the wombs in the cows that are going to be urinating all over the fields.
Very good. Another lesson here today. Go back to the video. Maybe you mentioned, I think in the last one or one of the previous ones, about there's 45 heifer calves born on the farm this year.
42.
42. You're only keeping 15 of them. How do you pick the 15?
I suppose we know a lot from the mothers. The genotypes is the other thing, and the sires is the other thing. Mainly the mothers. I suppose we can be fairly sure of that. Last year we had a heifer calf that was born the first week of March, and we kept her because of the mother that she was off of and the genetics that were there for her. It meant that we had to feed her milk for longer. She was out of sync, I suppose, with the rest of them, but her genetics was worthwhile holding on to.
Okay, yeah. Very good. One of the questions came in, you asking the question, you are spring calving. You know, you might be calving in January, but you are spring calving, 12th of January.
100% spring calving, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, look, we're running out of time almost. I think we have a couple more questions to go and then we'll probably be wrapping it up. Caroline, one of the things I've noticed, and I've been here, I think 3 times or so, maybe it's only twice, but every time I'm here, you know, and every time I ring you or whatever, you're always busy. Like, you know, you have 5 kids, Joe and the Walshes are contractors, you know, running a busy business here as well. How do you manage it all? Like, how do you keep it all going?
Keep your head. And then go out and roar and, you know, do that as well. Like, but that's just the way of keeping your head. But I suppose it's amazing. The townland that we're in is Crowhan. And the ancestry home of Henry Ford is up the road. So basically, Uncle Johnny has a poem about Henry Ford. And Henry Ford, he started with the assembly line. And that's, I suppose, one symptom or one thing that you can use. So I worked inside Riverview Vets for 6 years, and I also worked in animal health labs in Shannock. So if you work in a lab, there's SOPs, so standard of procedure. So there's whiteboards everywhere, like everybody knows the tail paint. So if everybody can know what's going on, it's very easy to give instructions. You're not repeating yourself as much. Technology, Smacks Tech, pasture base. I suppose I find the ICBF reports great. Milk recording is absolutely fantastic. We done the cell counts there the other evening, got the report back. There was one cow had a cell count of 969. She got E. coli at the start of the year. We had her cured, but to me that quarter was too high. And I didn't think that because it was E. coli that there was point in treating that. I didn't think it was going to respond to antibiotics. I said to Daniel before we came down milking that she was 969. The California milk test is in the basket inside the pit. I showed Daniel, here's how we do it. Look, the consistency is jelly. I put on a kick bar on the cow. There was a band put on her leg. It's written up in the top. The 2 bands is for the front, 1 band is for the back. Caitlin doesn't even need to ask me the next milking that cow now has a stopper in the back left hand quarter. So everybody can know if you put the band on, if you do the tail painting.
But some people say that those jobs, so the walk on the farm 45 times a year, every 5 days, the milk recording, you know, they're all extra work. Like, you know, they see that as work, but you see that as a value in it in order to reduce the workload.
But it's therapy as well. Like you imagine if you can go down and sit down on a stone, half the ways down the other side of the road and sit on a stone and listen to the birds and do your grass walk. Like, that's therapy. Like, you know, I suppose farming is my hobby and my passion, so I can put it all together.
Yeah.
And get satisfaction out of getting results.
You've also obviously invested, you know, you have the underpass, makes life easier.
Yeah.
You have a milking parlour. How many units have you in the parlour?
16 units.
Okay.
It was bought second hand of Tom Hart. I suppose it was lucky. I went to the ploughing match and I was buying a 12-unit Gascoigne with bells and whistles. Unfortunately, I fell into the forgotten young farmer category. We didn't get a 60% grant. So the pocket was a bit slack. So the second hand 16 unit was better. And the other thing with the lads, like I was happy out with my tin unit above in the, I suppose, where I started, because I'd sit down at the back of the parlour and have a rest there while the cows were milking. But in fairness to Patrick and Joe, they were like, look, we'll put in more units, you'll get out of there faster. And it did make sense afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. Listen, I think at this point we're ready to sum up. I'd like to firstly and foremostly thank Caroline and the Walsh family, the wider Walsh family.
And the O'Neill family.
And the O'Neill family, who have some members here tonight as well, for their help and support, I suppose, particularly to Teagasc in organising tonight. Look, as I said at the start, it wasn't what we really wanted to do to raise awareness and to show what Caroline and the family are doing here. But it's the best we could do, and I think we got the most out of the night. So thanks particularly to Caroline and to Mark Tracy, the advisor, for being so open and honest and not holding back. I think, I got a lot out of it tonight, and I think everyone else did as well that watched it. Look, you can watch back later on, and you can pass the link out to your friends and whatever else. Look, at this point, just want to wrap up to say thanks again. Stay safe and safe farming, and hopefully we'll be on farm next year.